In the heart of the southern African plains, where the mighty Zambezi River winds its way through the land, there existed a kingdom known as Kanyemba. This kingdom was ruled by King Dumisani, a leader of great power and wealth, whose reign had brought prosperity and peace to his people. His palace, built from the finest stones, stood proudly on a hill that overlooked the vast stretches of savanna and forest, where the animals roamed freely and the soil was rich with crops. King Dumisani was a man of imposing presence, with a voice that could command the attention of any crowd. He was known far and wide for his bravery in battle and his wisdom in governance. Under his rule, Kanyemba had expanded its borders, and its people had flourished. The kingdom was blessed with abundant harvests, and the cattle herds were among the largest in the region. The king's name was spoken with respect and admiration throughout the land. However, with the power he wielded came a growing sense of pride. Over the years, King Dumisani began to see himself as invincible, a man above the gods and spirits who watched over the land. He no longer sought the counsel of the village elders, nor did he honor the traditions that had guided his ancestors. Instead, he surrounded himself with advisors who praised his every decision, feeding his ego and reinforcing his belief that nothing could harm his kingdom. One day, as the sun set over the kingdom and the sky turned a deep shade of red, an unexpected event occurred. The waters of the Zambezi River, usually calm and steady, began to rise. The river's currents grew stronger, and the water, once crystal clear, turned a murky brown. The people of Kanyemba watched in fear as the river, which had always been their source of life, seemed to be turning against them. Among the people was an elderly Sangoma named Gogonai Asher. She was revered for her ability to communicate with the ancestors and interpret their will. Gogonai Asher had served the royal family for many years, offering guidance and wisdom to King Dumisani's father before him. Her long grey hair was braided with beads, and her face was lined with the years of experience and knowledge she carried. As the river continued to swell, Gogonai Asher fell into a deep trance, communing with the spirits of the land. She saw a vision of great calamity. The Zambezi River, overflowing its banks, would flood the kingdom, sweeping away everything in its path. The spirits revealed to her that this disaster could be averted, but only if King Dumisani humbled himself, offered sacrifices to the river spirits, and listened to the wisdom of the elders. Disturbed by what she had seen, Gogonai Asher made her way to the palace to deliver the prophecy. She was granted an audience with King Dumisani, who sat on his throne of carved ebony wood, surrounded by his courtiers and advisors. The king regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and impatience, for he did not hold the same reverence for the spiritual traditions as his father had. "Nkosi, may you live long," Gogonai Asher began, bowing low before the king. "I have seen a vision from the ancestors. The Zambezi River, which has always been our source of life, is angry. The spirits have shown me a great flood that will come and destroy our kingdom. The only way to prevent this disaster is for you to offer sacrifices to the river spirits and heed the counsel of your elders." King Dumisani listened with a stern expression, and when Gogonai Asher finished, he leaned back in his throne and laughed dismissively.
"Old woman, do you come here to fill my heart with fear? I am King Dumisani, the ruler of Kanyemba, the greatest kingdom in all the land. The Zambezi River has always served us well, and will continue to do so. Your visions are nothing more than the ramblings of an old mind, and I have no time for such nonsense."
Gogonai Asher's heart sank as she realized that the king would not heed her warning. "Nkosi, please," she pleaded.
"Do not ignore the words of the ancestors. Your father, the great King Mzilikazi, always sought their guidance and respected their will. It is not too late to save your people."
But King Dumisani waved her off.
"Enough. I will not be swayed by the fears of an old woman. Leave my palace and take your dire warnings with you.
With a heavy heart, Gogo Nyasha left the palace, knowing that disaster was now inevitable. She returned to her village and continued to pray to the spirits for mercy, but she knew that King Dumisani's pride had sealed the fate of Kanyemba. In the days that followed, the sky darkened with ominous clouds, and the air grew thick with the smell of rain. The Zambezi River continued to rise, its waters creeping ever closer to the villages that lined its banks. The people grew increasingly anxious, but King Dumisani dismissed their fears, assuring them that the kingdom was safe under his rule. Then, one fateful night, the storm struck with a vengeance. Torrential rains poured from the heavens, and the wind howled through the trees like a pack of wild hyenas. The Zambezi River, swollen beyond its limits, broke free of its banks, and a wall of water surged across the land. Villages were swept away in an instant, crops were destroyed, and the cattle that had once roamed the plains were lost to the raging waters. In his palace, King Dumisani watched in horror as the floodwaters rose higher and higher. He could see the destruction from his throne, the once thriving kingdom of Kanyemba now a vast, churning sea. The king's palace, perched on the hill, seemed safe for a time, but even it was not spared from the wrath of the river spirits. The water continued to rise, and soon it began to seep into the palace itself. Realizing that he had been wrong, King Dumisani ordered his servants to bring him the sacred items of his ancestors. He intended to offer sacrifices and beg the river spirits for forgiveness, but it was too late. The floodwaters, relentless and unforgiving, crashed through the palace gates, sweeping away everything in their path. In his final moments, King Dumisani stood in the great hall of his palace, surrounded by the swirling waters. He could hear the spirits' voices, cold and distant, reminding him of the prophecy he had so arrogantly ignored. With a cry of despair, the king was engulfed by the flood, and the palace of Kanyemba was no more. When the waters finally receded, the kingdom of Kanyemba was left in ruins. The fertile plains were buried under layers of mud, the villages had been washed away, and the people who survived were scattered across the land. Only a few were left to rebuild from the remnants of what had once been a prosperous kingdom. The tale of King Dumisani and the prophecy became a somber legend, passed down through the generations as a warning against the dangers of pride and the importance of respecting the spirits. The neighboring kingdoms spoke of Kanyemba with a mixture of pity and fear, for they knew that the wrath of the river spirits was not to be taken lightly. And so, the story of King Dumisani lived on, a tragic reminder that no one, not even the most powerful of kings, could escape the consequences of their actions. What are your thoughts on the tale of King Dumisani? Do you believe the spirits were just in their punishment, or was there another way the tragedy could have been avoided?